Great. So we are now doing writing constructed responses about this topic, comparing whole numbers, right? And this is really interesting because we have been talking a lot in our meetings about using what it takes to go from a 3 to a 4. And that basically what it takes to go from a 3 to a 4 is not just to describe like how you got the answer and what the answer is, but what that big idea was that even like allowed you to do that work or allowed you to follow that step, right? And so we talked about the big idea already the day before. And it's not like this big idea that we're asking kids to write is new, right? We mentioned you look in the place to the left because it's the biggest place. It has more value than any of the other places. And that is actually, we want them to be writing that as well. And we don't want them to be writing it by rote. That's kind of the challenge, is like, once we're getting from 3s to 4s, we're really talking about helping kids communicate effectively. And sometimes the big idea comes first and sometimes it comes second. But that is the thing that we're going to really try to push for. Now, if a kid's getting zeros on constructed responses, we're thinking about how to get them to 1. And they don't need to be writing the big idea. They just need to maybe be using a place value chart to line up these numbers. But hearing the big idea doesn't hurt them either, right? Because the big idea comes back to what procedures was I going to need to do. So all of that is to frame like where we are at this moment of time is really raising the bar for what we expect for excellent constructed responses, right? And we're going to do that for 3 different days. 1 after comparing whole numbers, 1 after comparing decimals, 1 after comparing fractions. So writing constructed responses with comparing whole numbers in different forms. When we write constructed responses, they never want us to just say how we got the answer. They always want us to explain the big idea we use to compare numbers. And I take a little pause here. That doesn't mean we need to take all day. Like the big idea can be summarized in 1 sentence. But just like we should take that for granted. I don't trust that ANET wrote the very best directions. ANET sometimes leaves out the word explain. But I know, and I don't know what PARCC even asks, but I know that their evidence tables in PARCC say that they want kids to justify their reasoning. Say that they want kids, right, to construct, right? They want them to, let's go back up here, reason about the place value system itself. That's what they think of when they're talking about justifying their reasoning and constructing an argument, that they're talking about the place value system itself here, not just how to literally do this thing. So, sorry, back to the PowerPoint. They always want us to explain the big idea we use, in addition to how we did it. What is that big idea, right? And what is the big idea, kids, that we use to compare numbers? What is like the main thing we use to do this procedure and follow this anchor chart? And maybe let a kid say it and write it down. It's that the biggest place value, tell us which number is biggest. Those are the ones to the left. There's lots of ways to say it. And so you will always want to give your answer, explain how you got the answer, but also explain the big place value idea that helped you know what to do. And you don't have to do these in this order. You might start with the big place value idea and then explain how you got your right answer and then give it. There's lots of ways to do it, but just don't forget this one if you want to be great, right? So here we go. I want to show you, the difference, I should say, between a good and a great explanation. But first, just try this problem on your own. And so what you're going to do is you're going to give just this problem to kids. You can do it on paper or on whiteboards and let them do it. Let them write their explanation, right? Go around, notice what people say, have conversations, talk about work. At this point, they should know to be setting up their place value chart, right? And then you can have a few kids share out. You could have them turn and talk. But show them these 2 answers and have them talk about which explanation they think is better. So I added 9,000 plus 800 plus 70,000, and I got 79,800. For the second number, I used a place value chart and filled in the other places with zeros. I got 150,000. Then I line up my numbers. 150,000 is bigger than 79,800 because 150,000 has a 1 in the 100,000s, and 79,800 has a 0 in the 100,000s, and 1 is more than 0. Let me just say, this is not a bad explanation. I think it's maybe a little longer than it needs to be, but it's great. It's correct. It didn't skip any steps. This is really, really good. But it's not justifying your reasoning. It's just explaining your reasoning. It's explaining what you did or how you got your answer. But it's not justifying it. This one does justify it. Now, by the way, you're not starting with that. You're going to have kids just discuss which is better and get their thoughts, right? Like, I like this one. It explains all the steps. I like this one. It's short. Who knows what they're going to say? But what you want to point out then is when you read this one has a sentence with main idea. After you've read it and after you've discussed. Sorry, I kind of did this out of order. I jumped to the punchline for you as teachers. You're going to just, which one do you think is better? Read them both. Let them talk. Then you name it. This one's better. Let's read this one, teachers. 9,800 and 70,000 is the same as 79,800. 15 10,000s is the same as 150,000. Then I lined up my numbers. I looked in the place to the left because that is the place with the biggest value, and it will always be more than the other values. 150,000 has more 100,000s, so 150,000 is biggest. You could talk about like what's the same in these explanations? What's different, right? This person explained how exactly they got 490 and how exactly they got this and how they lined them up and which number they looked at in the place. So they were really detailed, but this one, and you're going to then show it, had this really money big idea sentence. What's the money big idea sentence? There it is. I looked in the place to the left because that is the place with the biggest value, and it will always be more than the other values, right? Explaining that is getting to something bigger than this specific example. It's getting to something that's true about all numbers. It's generalizing, and that is what we want to at least show them. Not only so that they can have their writing go from good to great, but also so that our babies who don't understand where to begin know something universally true about how we compare all numbers. And they can go back to, okay, so that must be why my teacher's driving me so nuts about using this place value chart. Is because she wants me to look to the place to the left because it's always the place with the biggest value. So hopefully you see how setting our vision to this really, really ambitious constructed response is not just raising our writing standards, which I definitely think we need to do, but also just better instruction for all because it's connecting the procedural and the conceptual instead of what we normally do, right? Which is that we lay out the conceptual, but we then quickly get to the procedural, right? And we're really focused on that. Conceptual is just trying to help us get a right answer, and then we forget about it. Move on. If you've gotten the right answer, it's good enough. But this should really be something that we can continue to explain every time. So, sorry, I know this is a long one, but I really want us to raise. So then give them this constructed response. Again, they're solving it correctly and explaining how you solved it, and then there's the big idea. Here's what's cool. Guess what? The big idea is the same big idea. Comparing numbers is comparing numbers. We look in the biggest place value because it has more than all the rest. That's why I arrange these the way I do here. That's why I put 9 in my leftmost spot because it's the biggest spot. And I want it to be the biggest value, right? So again, let them write. And then you can do a show call with their work. Have a conversation with their work. Identify which sentence. Give them the main idea or add it. And then it's time to do some IP and do an exit ticket.